Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, 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 Señor Jesús, Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha. Come, Lord Jesus, Maranatha. Come, Jesus, Maranatha. Come, Jesus, Maranatha. Come, Jesus, Maranatha. Come, Jesus, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha.
Veni, Domine.
Maranatha.
Veni, Domine.
Maranatha.
Veni, Domine.
Maranatha. Veni, Domine, Maranatha. Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha. Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha. Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha. Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha. Cu Iesul iubirea, Maranatha. Cu Iesul iubirea, Maranatha. Cu Iesul iubirea, Maranatha. Cu Iesul iubirea, Maranatha.
Ven, Señor Jesús.
Maranatha. Ven, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, 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 Señor Jesús, Ven, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, Señor Jesús. Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha. Come Lord Jesus, Maranatha. Come Jesus, Maranatha. Come Jesus, Maranatha. Come Jesus, Maranatha. Come Jesus, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha.
Veni Domine.
Maranatha.
Veni Domine.
Maranatha.
Veni Domine.
Maranatha. Veni Domine, Maranatha. Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha. Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha. Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha. Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha. Tru Iesul Iba, Maranatha. Tru Iesul Iba, Maranatha. Tru Iesul Iba, Maranatha. Tru Iesul Iba, Maranatha.
Ven Señor Jesús.
Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven 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 Señor Jesús, Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. 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 Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha, come Lord Jesus, Maranatha, come Jesus, Maranatha, come Jesus, Maranatha, come Jesus, Maranatha, come Jesus, Maranatha, Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha, Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha, Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha, Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha,
Veni Domine,
Maranatha,
veni Domine,
Maranatha,
veni Domine,
Maranatha, veni Domine, Maranatha, Doamne Yeshua, Maranatha, Doamne Yeshua, Maranatha, Doamne Yeshua, Maranatha, Doamne Yeshua, Maranatha, Tru Iesul Iba, Maranatha, Tru Iesul Iba, Maranatha, Tru Iesul Iba, Maranatha, Tru Iesul Iba, Maranatha,
ven Señor Jesús,
Maranatha, ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha, ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha, ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha, ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha, Señor Jesús, Maranatha, ven 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 Señor Jesús, Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha, 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 ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha,
come Lord Jesus,
Maranatha,
come Lord Jesus,
Maranatha,
come Lord Jesus,
Maranatha, come Lord Jesus, Maranatha, come Jesus, Maranatha, come Jesus, Maranatha, come Jesus, Maranatha. Jesus, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha.
Veni Domine,
Maranatha.
veni Domine,
Maranatha.
veni Domine,
Maranatha, veni Domine, Maranatha. Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha, Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha, Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha, Domnul Yeshua, Maranatha. True Yesul iba, Maranatha. True Yesul iba, Maranatha. True Yesul iba, Maranatha. True Yesul iba, Maranatha.
ven Señor Jesús,
Maranatha, ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha, ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha, ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha, ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven 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 Señor Jesús, Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. 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 Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha.
come Lord Jesus,
Maranatha.
come Lord Jesus,
Maranatha.
come Lord Jesus,
Maranatha. Come Lord Jesus, Maranatha. Alleluia.
Hello, welcome to Skype call testing service. After the beep, please record a message. Afterwards, your message will be played back to you. If you are able to hear your own voice, then you have configured Skype correctly. If you hear this message, but not your own voice, then something is wrong with your audio recording. Hello, welcome to Skype call testing service. After the beep, please record a message. Afterwards, your message will be played back to you.
Hello, is this the studio?
Hey, Roy.
Hey.
How you doing?
Okay.
We were just about to call you.
Oh, you didn't just call me?
No, I had my finger on the trigger to call
Oh,
you.
I don't know. I didn't call you.
Oh, I must have accidentally clicked something.
No problem.
Mistake. But
No problem.
Since I got you on the line, might as well keep you.
Yeah, you never know with Skype.
Oh, you really don't.
A bird in the hand.
So last night we had the entire downtown area where we live lose power. So our station was out. All the other radio stations were out. All the traffic lights were out. So there was dead air all across Alexandria. But it's been corrected since. So
But this wasn't well, obviously we had a hurricane here, but this wasn't like that kind of a thing.
we don't know what it is. It was sunny and wasn't a storm. It was clean, clear, and all of a sudden just blackout.
Oh, just like Ukraine. Okay.
But then again, you stay away from Alexandria if you can.
Yeah, well,
It's
you may want to stay away from Southwest Florida right now, too.
Oh, you're right. Good Lord. It's a nightmare. But yeah, so we go on in about 5 minutes.
Okay,
And do you
sounds
want me
good.
to just hit you up when it's about a minute till?
Yeah, what's that mean? I don't quite follow.
Oh, I'm just gonna check back in, make sure you're still connected around.
Oh, I see. But,
You're just gonna
I'll
stay
be
on for-
I'll be listening to Radio Maria in the meantime.
All
or
right,
nothing.
So you can still hear it.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Okay, great.
And beg you
Okay, I think I'll spare you that music.
Señor Jesús, Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha. Come, Jesus. Maranatha. Come, Jesus. Maranatha. Come, Jesus. Maranatha. Come, Jesus. Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha.
Veni, Domine.
Maranatha.
Veni, Domine.
Maranatha. Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor 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 Jesús, Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. 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 Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus.
Maranatha.
Come, Lord Jesus. Maranatha.
Come Jesús, Maranatha. Come Jesús, Maranatha. Come Jesús, Maranatha. Come Jesús, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha. Ergo Kyrie, Maranatha.
On 88.1 FM WHHN Hollidaysburg, Altoona in Mississippi, also on 88.1 FM WOLM D'Iberville, Biloxi in Wisconsin, on 91.3 FM WRMW Peshtigo, and in Florida on 91.9 FM WMKL Phoenix, Miami.
Radio Maria USA, a Christian voice in your home.
You are listening to Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home. We now present our program, Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism, with your host, Roy Showman.
Hi, this is Roy Showman, and welcome once again to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism, the show on Radio Maria that celebrates the Jewish roots of the Catholic Church, or seen the other way around, that celebrates the fulfillment, the full realization of the promise of Judaism in the Catholic Church and her sacraments. Well, I don't know how long you've been listening to the show, but the theme of the show is at the intersection between Judaism and the Catholic Church. But every so often, I take a little bit of a detour. Now, today might be such a detour, or I might swerve back to the intersection, depending on how the Spirit works. But the theme of today's show, at least nominally, is somewhat different. It is around fear. And in fact, the title of the show is, what is the title of the show? The title of the show is Perfect Love Casts Out Fear, which is 1 John 4:18, Divine Providence, Fear, and Trustful Surrender. So with any luck or with a lot of grace, that's what I want to weave together today. I want to weave together the phenomenon of fear, the spiritual warfare behind fear, the existence of divine providence and the necessity of our confidence in divine providence, and also the need for our trustful surrender to divine providence into the hands of Jesus. We know from St. Faustina, Jesus, I trust in you. The need to have full confidence in God's love and in God's omnipotence and in God's presence and in God's care and concern for us in order to be successful in overcoming fear. So that's it. And maybe even I'll have an opportunity to talk about what this has to do with Judaism, which is a lot, actually, but I'll stay on the Catholic side of the fence for now. Now, why is fear so incredibly important to understand and to master? There are a lot of answers to that. One is Jesus talked a lot about it. Do not be afraid. And I will go into some of those passages. But the foundation of today's show is actually the premise that fear is in many ways the opposite of love, that God is love. We know that from the scripture. God's involvement with the world is one of love. God's control of the world, control is not quite the right word, but his interaction with the world is one of love. His motivation of all of his creatures is one of love. Certainly, the one thing he sends us is love, and the one thing he wants from us is love. Now, let's turn around to the counterfeit of God, to Satan or to the devil. The devil controls the world through fear. The one thing he sends out to control his creatures is fear, both his demons, the demonic creatures that are under his control, and also the human creatures that he wants to control. And the one thing that he wants from his creatures is essentially fear. It's obedience, it's submission. It's terrified submission. And so as love is the fundamental relationship between God and, let's say, the environment of creatures, fear is the fundamental relationship between the devil and the environment of creatures. And when you stop to think about what it is that most often separates people from God, most often, I'll have to justify that later, but very, very often is fear. And I will argue that fear is actually the devil's number one tool for driving a wedge between us and our proper relationship to God. So that's the theme of today's show. Whether I can carry it off or not is another issue. When one thinks about when one turns away from God, when usually everyone's different, but very often people turn away from God essentially because of fear. They turn away from what God wants from them because of fear. We can think of some people very close to us who perhaps had the possibility of a religious vocation, but it was too terrifying. Or perhaps they had a possibility of another vocation, such as marriage, and it was too terrifying. That happens too, that people are too afraid to embrace the vocation of marriage. Or what about simply honesty and not, let's say, cheating or stealing? How often do people cheat or steal because they are looking to money to be protection against the threateningness of the world? Is it not true that I'd better get to the words of Jesus very soon, or else I'm going to drown. But so I'll get to the words of Jesus right now, okay? Because that's safer. Okay, so I'll read a passage. First of all, I'll read a passage from Matthew 6. And interestingly enough, according to one of the visionaries of Medjugorje, I'm not in a position to give an imprimatur or not an imprimatur. I know they're not church approved yet, messages, but according to this visionary, on March 1st, 1984, the Blessed Virgin Mary told the people through her, every Thursday, read again the passage of Matthew 6, 24 to 34. Okay, so I'm going to read the passage of Matthew 6:24-34. Do not lay up for yourselves, this is Jesus speaking, this is the Sermon on the Mount. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust consumes and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is sound, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is not sound, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness. Now, I see we have a caller on hold. So I will take the call, and then I will start probably the passage from the beginning again, because I hate to interrupt Jesus, because he pulls rank. But for now, I guess the caller pulls rank on both me and Jesus. So caller, what's your name and where are you calling from, please?
Tara, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Did you have a question or a comment?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I thought I had a call in early enough to be on hold for the calls.
No problem. You've got the floor.
Well, this is a timely message for me. My question was if you think that with the spiritual warfare and the fear, because it's something I'm going through now, if the rosary, I guess I go to Mass, what fights it the best? So I'll give you a little bit of the background. I was born and raised Catholic, and I'm 44 now. And in my teens, I started to go away from it when I went to college when I was 18.
No, I actually think...
And I practiced a lot of like New Age and occult, tarot cards, things like that. And I went away from it recently as I went back to the church, but I get a lot of like things of fear now. And I don't know if it's spiritual warfare or if it's, just everyday life. But it seems like since I kind of came out of that life and went back to my faith, I have a lot of fear and anxiety and worries about things.
Okay. Well, thanks for the question. Let me just ask you, did you by any chance send me an email? Are you the same person? No. Okay. Well, I guess there's...
I might have.
Okay, because it sounds familiar. But it doesn't matter either way. First of all, I had a very unfortunate little passage through the New Age kind of stuff also in the very beginning of my conversion. And there is a lot of pulling out infection and roots, because all of that New Age stuff, the tarot cards, any of those practices, meditation practices, reading Shirley MacLaine, anything those introduce demons into you. Actually, I don't mean in a state of possession, but they do infiltrate. They infiltrate your mind. They get a fair amount of leverage over what's going on in between your ears and your head and your heart and so forth. So, and in my case, I got to tell you, it took years. It took years before I was free from, let's say, anxiety attacks, which came from the demonic infiltration that I had when I was, kind of looking into New Age. In my case, there was a tremendous problem with discouragement and suicidal thoughts and so forth. And occasionally I had the grace through prayer to actually be shown that it came from those New Age influences that I had imbibed. So I would say number one, I don't want to say number one in order of importance, but definitely be prayed over for deliverance from any of those influences you had. I don't know to what extent you've made use of the sacrament of confession to try to renounce any influences that you picked up during that period, but definitely you need, you need a little, backup artillery behind you, so to speak, to push away or to purge those influences, and definitely use confession as much as you can to get rid of that stuff. If there's a, so inclined priest who's willing to pray deliverance over you, do that. You're not alone. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Christians and Catholics who have dabbled in the New Age who are still being haunted and oppressed by stuff they picked up. And this isn't a matter of exorcism. You don't qualify for that, but it is a matter of a kind of deliverance from those influences. The other thing, or one other thing, is read saints. Read saints. Read things that saints wrote. Don't read books about what saints thought. Read, Padre Pio. You can read stories about Padre Pio if you want. Today's the feast day of St. Teresa of Avila. Read St. Teresa of Avila's life, let's say, because the antidote to fear, and then I'll get back on this on the show because that's what the show is about actually, but the antidote to fear is actually believing in God. No, not just believing in God as some kind of an abstract, but really, really, really understanding that God is hearing every word that I say right now, every word that you say, every prayer that you say, that he loves you more than you could ever imagine, and that he is, needless to say, absolutely all-powerful, and cares about you more than you care about yourself. And if you can really get that down in your bones, then there's absolutely nothing to fear except displeasing God. And that's where sanctity lies, is getting to the point where the only thing you can imagine fearing is displeasing God. I don't know if it was St. Teresa of Avila. I don't remember, maybe it was the little flower, but one of those big time saints said that she would prefer to be martyred. She would prefer to suffer absolutely anything anyone could suffer rather than commit the smallest sin. So I'm not saying I'm there. I'm not saying you're there. But if you really understand who God is and what his relationship to you is in a very real way, then there's nothing to be afraid of except displeasing God. And the way to grow in that direction is to just read these people who kind of naturally saw the world that way. And those are sort of the saints, like St. Teresa of Avila or Padre Pio or whatever. They saw it, they understood it, and you see the world through their eyes when you read what they wrote. So that's my advice. I think it's pretty good advice. Are you still there?
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. I found your testimony about becoming Catholic and the Blessed Mother and everything, and that really pulled me back, and I started to pray the rosary again, and I started to kind of dabble back again, but it pulled me out. So thank you for your testimony.
Good. Yeah, and definitely it's going to be a long haul, but all you have to do is keep hauling away. And don't expect not to have that problem. Just expect that problem to gradually diminish until there's not a problem anymore. Okay, I'll get back to Jesus. Sure. And let me just say that I will make a break about probably in about 20 minutes or something, and take calls coming out of the break. So I'll have a short musical break of a couple of minutes, and so if you want to call. Probably it's a good idea, or if you call during the break, I'll just immediately turn to the call board coming out of the break and take any calls. Back to Matthew, chapter 6, Sermon of the Mount. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust consume and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is sound, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is not sound, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, nor about your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, they neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add 1 cubit to his span of life? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Therefore do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be yours as well. Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Let the day's own trouble be sufficient for the day. So that's from the Sermon on the Mount. Now, there are a number of really key. I take that back. I don't want to say Jesus really hit the nail on the head, okay, because this is God. So it's ridiculous to even say anything like that. But it's certainly worth going through this and thinking about the implications of it. And we know it's all true, okay? It came from the mouth of Jesus. So there's no wiggle room to say, well, he was exaggerating or something like that. He's saying, making another number of points here. One is, we can only serve one master. We can only have our eyes on one goal. We can only be, listening to one voice in our head, so to speak. We can be serving the world. And Jesus says mammon here. Sometimes, it's not exactly clear. Mammon was a pagan god. Some people say he represents money. I think it's fair to say he represents the spirit of the world in any case. So you can serve the spirit of the world. You can have your eye on the world and the concerns of the world and the consolations of the world and pleasing the world, or you can have your eyes on God and pleasing him. You cannot have your eyes on both simultaneously. The passage here where it says, the eye is the lamp of the body, so if your eye is sound, your whole body will be full of light. My understanding is that the underlying Greek is single. In other words, if your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. Or it's a word that could be translated either as single or sound. So it could actually be, you can be focused on the spirit of the world, you can be focused on Jesus, but you're going to be blind if you try to split your vision between the two. No one can serve two masters, either who hate the one and love the other, or vice versa. So the fundamental choice is which master you serve. Now, then Jesus goes on to say, therefore, do not be anxious about your life, and goes on. So there are two ways to look at this, and they're both perfectly true. One is that Jesus is saying, don't be anxious about your life because I'll take care of everything. But the question is he saying, don't be anxious about your life because I'll take care of everything if you choose to serve me? And is he kind of saying at the same time, look, if you take the world for your master, then it's up to him to satisfy all your needs. So you've got to choose. Now, if you choose me as your master, in other words, God, you don't have to worry about what the world throws at you because I'll take care of it. But if you choose the world as your master, then you're really limiting how much I can do for you because you've chosen a different master. And then when he goes on to say how futile it is, how unnecessary it is to worry about anything coming from the world, the question is that true even if you take the world for your master? Or is it only true if you've made the right choice about which master you serve? And there are other places, which I hope to get to now and actually pull off, which strongly suggest that the idea that Jesus will take care of all of your needs and all of your concerns depends on your having him as your master and not the world as your master. But what this means is that if you do choose to focus on Jesus and worry most about displeasing him and desire most to please him, then you can be completely immune from any fear of what the world throws at you, because Jesus is going to take care of it for you. Now, let me turn to a similar reading, which was a reading from Mass this week. It's along the same lines, and it's the same very worthwhile speaker, the same definitely knows what he's talking about speaker, because it's also from Jesus, from Luke 12. There is nothing concealed that will not be revealed, nor secret that will not be known. Therefore, whatever you have said in darkness will be heard in light, and what you have whispered behind closed doors will be proclaimed on the housetops. I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but after that can do no more. I shall tell you whom to fear. Be afraid of the one who, after killing, has the power to cast into hell. Yes, I tell you, be afraid of that one. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 coins, yet not one of them has escaped the notice of God? Even the hairs of your head have all been counted. Do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Okay? So again, you've got to choose, you've got to choose your master. You've got to choose who you're going to be afraid of, so to speak. Are you going to be afraid of the spirit of the world? The worst he can do is kill the body, and then what you have waiting for you is an eternity of unimaginable bliss with God in heaven. Are you going to be afraid of him? Or are you going to be afraid of displeasing God? Be afraid of the one who, after you die, has the power to cast you into hell. And then Jesus immediately goes on to say, he says, yes, I tell you, be afraid of that one. Don't be afraid of him because he loves you. I mean, in other words, he adores you. There's no reason to be afraid of him. But be afraid of displeasing him. Be afraid of offending him. Be afraid of earning his punishment, let's say. Don't be afraid of displeasing or earning the punishment of Satan. Because if you're pleasing God, Satan is going to be pretty mad at you. You can take that to the bank. But anyway, back to Jesus. I shall show you whom to fear. Be afraid of the one who, after killing, has the power to cast into hell. Yes, I tell you, be afraid of that one. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 small coins, yet not one of them has escaped the notice of God? So he immediately makes the transition, so to speak, between not being afraid of the devil, or not being afraid of what the world throws at you, but being afraid of God, and immediately transitions to God's totally overarching providence and protection of you and concern for you and taking care of you. Just like in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. Immediate transition between which master do you serve and you being enveloped in God's protective love. I don't think he's changing the subject. I think he is flipping the coin and going from one side of the coin to the other side of the coin. I hope this makes sense. I wish I could see you out there or hear you out there and find out if it's making sense to you. It certainly makes sense to me. Now, some of you may be familiar. Okay. I'm looking at the clock and seeing when I'm going to take the music break and take calls, but I better go on for another 10 minutes or so. Some of you are familiar with the Surrender Novena, which comes from Father Dolindo, who was he's not canonized, but Padre Pio called him a real saint. That's pretty close to being canonized in some ways. And he was very, very, very high up there in his spiritual knowledge, let's say. And I'm going to read a prayer of his. Now, this prayer is actually the prayer from which the Surrender Novena was drawn. So some of it may sound familiar to those of you who know the Surrender Novena. But in it, Jesus makes very clear over and over and over again that he wants to take care of all of your concerns. He wants to solve all of your problems. But you have to give him permission to. And the way you give him permission to is by turning them over to him and not getting anxious about them yourself and not trying to take care of them in the wrong way yourself. As long as you own your problems and your fears and your anxieties, you're boxing Jesus out. When you let go of them, you're opening the door for Jesus to take care of them. That's the theme of this prayer. Okay, so this is now this prayer. Okay, I'll just read it. Jesus to the soul. So this is what Jesus is saying to the soul. Why are you upset and agitated? Leave your cares to me and all will be fine. I tell you honestly, every act of true and blind reliance on me results in what you desire and will resolve all your difficulties. Abandonment in me does not mean being frustrated, becoming anxious and desperate, offering me your anxious prayer that I may follow you and have your anxiety be a prayer. Okay? You have to let go of your anxiety, not consider your anxiety itself to be a prayer. Now, if you're unable to let go of your anxiety, if you're unable to let go of your fear, there's nothing wrong with praying about that. Dear Blessed Mother, as much as I want to, I'm trembling with fear inside about this situation. Please take this fear away from me. That's fine. That's not turning your fear into a prayer. It's praying to be freed from that fear. So this is something else. He's saying, don't think that your anxiety is the prayer that Jesus wants to hear. What he wants to hear is the opposite of that. As Jesus, I give up, you take care of it. Okay. Abandonment means to shut the eyes of your soul in peace, moving your thoughts away from your troubles, not marinating in them. And instead of thinking about your worries and pain, let me take over your troubles. Simply say, Jesus, you take over. To be worried, restless, and to think of the consequences of an event is the opposite of reliance. It is truly contrary to it. It is like a child who wants his mother to take care of his needs, but in the way he wants, and with his whims and childish ideas, he simply gets in the way of her work. Shut your eyes and go with the flow of my grace. Do not ponder over your present moment and put away thoughts of your future as a temptation. Rest in me, believe in my goodness, and I swear on my love. Okay, now there is a very real sense. I started out a while ago talking about how fear is the devil's attack on God's love in a sense. Fear is the devil's diabolical inversion and perversion and imitation of love, so to speak, counterfeit of love. Now, the devil, I think fear is his number one weapon, arrow in his quiver. And one of the reasons why fear is so beloved of the devil is because what does fear mean? What fear means is you don't trust God, which means it's actually sacrilege. In other words, we know that God loves us. We know that God is all-powerful. We know that God is aware of everything that happens to us at every moment. And we know that, as St. Paul says, all things work together for the good for those who love God. Therefore, there's no reason for fear. There's no relevance to fear. If you have fear, what's that mean? It's actually sacrilege. It means you either don't believe in God's love, you don't believe in his power, you don't believe in his caring over you, you don't believe in his attention he's paying to you. However you cut it, to have fear means that you are basically sacrilege. You're saying that God is not true to one or another of his promises or Jesus' statements and so forth. You're actually turning away from faith if you have fear. You're choosing fear over faith. So of course the devil loves it because it is in itself sacrilege. If the devil tempts you with lust, let's say, then if he gets you to sin, you've turned away from God. But as long as you just feel the lust, you haven't turned away from God. It's not even a sin if you resist it. The same thing with anger. If you resist it and don't act on it, it's not a sin. It's just a temptation turned away. But if you feel fear, if you really feel fear, and if you believe in the fear, then you've already, in some sense, sinned. because you've already called God a liar. Anyway, continuing. I don't want to go too far there, but I'll make my little connection with Judaism maybe, and then I'll see if there are any calls that come in before I go on. I'll play the music, and I'll either go on with Dolindo, or I will take the calls and then go on with Dolindo. Now, this does have a lot to do with Judaism, because I grew up Jewish, and the prayer that Jews say 3 times a day, do I have it in front of me? It's called the Shema, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and it goes on to say, if we obey your commands, you will give us a rain in due season, our crops will be plentiful, our herds will multiply, and so forth. But if we turn away from your commands, then we will have drought, then we will have poverty, then we will have bad weather, then we will have suffering. So the central prayer of Judaism is basically, God will take care of you if you obey him. That's very much along the lines of what I was talking about, which is not surprising, because Judaism comes from God. At least the Old Testament comes from God, and the Shema is straight from the Old Testament. It's from Deuteronomy. But then we had this unfortunate event just before I was born, shortly before I was born, called the Holocaust, which was the most disastrous thing to happen to the Jewish people in 2,000 years. And that made a huge crisis of faith, because what do you do with it? If God is all powerful, and God is all good, and God cares for you, and you're the apple of God's eye, how could he have allowed that to happen? So in fact, Judaism is permeated with this implicit sacrilege against God, because if you let the Holocaust happen, it turns God, I hate to say it, into a liar. And the main icons of Jewish theology from the second half of the 20th century, I hate to say it, but they all suffered from this. One of the most prominent rabbis in the United States, Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg, he was the head of the American Jewish Congress. He said, quote, in his memoirs, "I was aware then in 1948 that I could never return to the Orthodox faith in God. I would not forgive him for the Holocaust, and I would not absolve him by agreeing that the death camps had existed in a realm that he could not control." In other words, God is not a good person because he allowed the Holocaust. Same thing with Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel won a Nobel Prize. He is the poster boy for second half of the 20th century Judaism. And he said that, oh gosh, I don't even want to read, well, maybe I can find it very quickly here, but it's not a happy thought. He said, "This was the meaning of the Holocaust. It implicated not only Abraham or his son, but their God as well. In the endless engagement with God, we proved to him that we were more patient than he, more compassionate also." Again, because God allowed the Holocaust to happen, God is evil, and we actually show that we're nicer than God, or we're better than God. And finally, from Elie Wiesel, anyway, that's enough. I don't have to flip through here and try to find others. Anyway, this may be a little bit of a going off on a limb of a tangent, but we have to keep our eyes focused on God's goodness, his love, his care for us, his power, that absolutely everything that happens is in some way, whether we know it or not, the best thing that he could possibly arrange for us, even if it causes suffering. Now, Jews don't have the advantage that we have as Catholics, because they can't look up and see God nailed to a cross, right? Because they don't believe in Jesus. So they don't understand that redemption comes through suffering. They don't understand the redemptive value of suffering. We do. We're Christians, we're Catholics. Every time you go to church, I mean, it's in the rubrics, it's supposed to be on every altar, or over every altar, there's supposed to be a crucifix with the crucified Jesus. not with the resurrected Jesus, but with a crucified Jesus. So you can look up and you can see that when God became man, this was his course. He emptied himself to a slave and to death on the cross. And that is the path that he followed. And that is the path that we have to a greater or lesser extent, share in. And therefore, there's nothing that happens in the world that is not divine providence as long as we're on God's side. Okay, I'm going to take the short musical break now. And if there are any calls when I come out, I'll come out to the calls. And what should I play for you? I'll play it's Arabic because that's the language that Jesus most likely spoke. And it is the thrice holy hymn in Arabic, sung by the sisters of Bethlehem. So here goes. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. And I see that, in fact, we do have a caller. Are you there, caller? And where are you calling from?
Yeah, hi, Roy. This is Lou. I'm calling from Emmitsburg, Maryland.
Hi. Well, thanks for calling. Did you have a question or a comment?
I read your book, Salvation is from the Jews, and I read it twice. It was so good, but I don't remember this. So how did they resolve this with God the Father after the Holocaust?
Well, that's a good question. And the tragedy is that many of them didn't. I don't want to say most of them didn't. One could almost say that most of them didn't. The only Jews that were, I don't want to make too much of a generalization, but the Jews who were the most successful with resolving it were the ultra-Orthodox Jews. They had two resolutions to it, so to speak. One was that it was a punishment because so many of the Jews had become secular. So many of the Jews had stopped following Judaism that there was, it was God's wrath to some extent fell upon the Jews. That was one of their ways of addressing it. Now I'm talking about the ones who did follow the law. The most observant ones thought that this might have been a punishment because the vast majority were not so observant. And the other thing is they did what all of us are really called upon to do, which is just to close our eyes and trust God and say, like Job, I don't know if you know the book of Job. It's a very interesting book in the Bible. Job, and he's talking to his friends, trying to figure out why are all these terrible things happening to me. And his friends have various theories that kind of don't work, like it's punishment for some horrible sin that you did that you're not aware of and so forth. And Job says, no, I didn't do any such sin. And he confronts God with this. And what's God's answer in Job? It's, I don't remember you there when I laid out the depths of the sea. I don't remember you there, when I created the whales or when I put the stars in the sky. Who are you to question why I do what I do? And so that's not a bad answer. We have much more of an answer because we understand the redemptive value of suffering. But the truth is, the bottom line is God, and we can trust him and we can be assured that he knows what he's doing, even if we're clueless about it. And that's essentially the only, to my knowledge, successful Jewish resolution to the problem. There's a tiny, tiny sliver of Judaism that has a sense of the redemptive value of suffering, but it's really more of a mystical thought than it is a pillar of the theology. So anyway, it's a great tragedy because Judaism has to some extent outgrown the Holocaust. In other words, Jews are not as obsessed with it as they were in the 50s and 60s. But in the 1950s and 60s, it completely, I'm in Southwest Florida. It was like the surge that came with Hurricane Ian. It was the tsunami that swept over Judaism and turned the theology kind of on its head, swept it away in the tsunami. So thanks for the question. It's a good question. It's not an entirely happy answer, but now we're 2 generations past the Holocaust, and so it doesn't have the same kind of driving effect on Jewish theology that it had when I grew up. Okay. Are you still there?
Also, do
Okay,
you think
good.
that because it happened to the Jews in Germany and not the Jews in Jerusalem?
No, the population of Jerusalem was tiny before World War II, and there were actually no. Anyway, I'll just make a short answer. No, it's a complicated history, but first of all, there were slaughters of the Jews in Israel at the time, and secondly, the Third Reich had plans to exterminate the Jews in Israel also. They just didn't survive long enough to do that. I mean, the Third Reich, I don't mean the Jews there. And the center of the Jewish world was not Israel until the foundation of the State of Israel in 1948. It's a long story, but it's a little bit off topic for today's show. There's a lot of this in my book, by the way, Salvation is from the Jews. Anyway, okay. Let me go back to Father Dolindo because we are Catholic, thank God.
God bless.
Thank you. Thanks for your call. And it's really important. It's really important to understand that fear is, first of all, fear that gives us anxiety, not the fear of sinning, but fear of the world, fear of poverty, fear of losing our job, fear of being sick, fear if we've gotten sick, fear of dying, all of that. That is straight from hell. That's straight from the devil if we feel fear. And there's no theologically justifiable feeling to feel fear. In fact, here's an interesting question. The martyrs, if you go to Mass every day, for instance, you'll find that half the saints that have feast days are martyrs, right? As a matter of fact, the text of the Mass goes through long litanies of martyrs during the consecration. Why are martyrs kind of the number one flavor of saint in the Catholic Church? It's what do all martyrs have in common? What all martyrs have in common is that they completely were not affected by fear. That's it. That's the one thing they all had in common. No fear. Or if they had fear, they didn't give into it at all, right? They chose the most painful tortures, the most painful deaths, rather than displeasing God. I think that the fact of the martyrs and the role of the martyrs in the church is in itself an illustration of how central fear is to the spiritual warfare between Satan and God. Right? If somebody is immune to fear, let's say, then they are actually immune to Satan in a way that is absolutely in its own category. Anyway, Father Delindo, before I get in too much trouble. Okay. Shut your eyes and go with the flow of my grace. Do not ponder over your present moment and put away thoughts of your future as a temptation. Rest in me, believe in my goodness, and I swear on my love. As a temptation. Thinking about our future, being anxious about our future, is a temptation. Where do temptations come from? They come from Satan. Satan can tie us in knots if we start focusing on the future. We don't know the future. How many times, how many times have we been terrified about something happening in the future that evaporated like that? I had a lawsuit against me, a very spurious, dishonest lawsuit against me. Many sleepless nights. How am I going to defend myself? What's going to happen if he wins? And so forth. And poof, it vanished into air, from one hour to the next. I'm sure we've all had things that, gave us ulcers for weeks that God just took away, just like a whiff, like a puff of smoke, blew it away. Anyway, continuing. That if you think like this, Jesus, you take over. I indeed will do it for you. I will comfort you, free you, and guide you. If I have to take you in a different direction than the one you are looking at, I will train you. I will pick you up in my arms, and you will find yourself like a baby sleeping in his mother's arms on the other shore. What gives you immense stress and hurts you is your reasoning over it, your thoughts, and the pains it gives you. We are inflicting this on ourselves by worrying about things. It is wanting at all costs to take care of by yourself what is afflicting you. How many things I can do, be it a material or spiritual need, when the soul turns to me, looks at me, and says to me, Jesus, you take over, and closes its eyes and rests in me. Now, this is not a coincidence. This is me interjecting again. It's not a coincidence that he says, how many things I can do when the soul turns to me, looks at me, and says to me, Jesus, you take over, and closes its eyes and rests in me. In other words, we have a choice. We can cling to our problem. If we cling to our problem, we're not letting Jesus take care of it. If we cling to our problem, Jesus isn't allowed to take care of it. We've pulled it away from Jesus and we've put it in Mammon's world, let's say, in our concern for the world. The condition, the necessary condition for Jesus to take care of it is for us to close our eyes and trust in him and let go of it. We have to let go of the problem for Jesus to have the freedom to take care of it. Continuing with Father Delindo, because he just says this over and over again. You do not receive many graces because you insist on getting them by yourself, but instead you will receive numberless graces when your prayer is full reliance on me. When you are in pain and pray that I may act, you want me to act as you believe I should. You do not turn to me. Instead, you want me to submit to your ideas. You are like a sick person who does not ask the doctor for the cure, but tells him what the cure is to be. Don't be like this, but pray as I taught you in the Our Father. Hallowed be your name, which means, may you be glorified in this need of mine. Your kingdom come, which means everything may work toward your kingdom in us and in the world. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, which means you direct it as it seems best to you for the good of our eternal and temporal life. Isn't that beautiful? The Our Father, hallowed be your name, which means may you be glorified in this need of mine. Hallowed be your name. May you be glorified in the resolution of this lawsuit against me. Hallowed be your name. May you be glorified in being about to give birth and being turned away from the last inn in Bethlehem. May you be glorified in whatever need this is that I am facing. Back to Dolindo. When you truly tell me, your will be done, which is the same then as to say, Jesus, you take over, then I intervene with all my omnipotence, and I will resolve every situation, even if there's no way out. Don't be frightened. Close your eyes and say, Jesus, you take over. I tell you again, I will do it for you. I take over only when you close your eyes. I take over only when you close your eyes. You have to let go of it before Jesus can take it over. I take over only when you close your eyes. You never sleep. You want to appraise everything, to think, to delve into everything. You choose to rely on human power, or worse, on men, trusting their intervention. This is what hampers my words and my will. It gets in the way. Jesus is unable to do what he wants because of the activity, in our anxiety, in our thoughts, that in which we're still wrestling with the situation. Dolindo, how much I long for this reliance in order to assist you, and how much I grieve to see your anxiety. Satan does just this. He gives you the anxiety to remove me from you and throw you into the human initiative. Trust only in me instead. Rest in me. Rely on me in everything. I do miracles in proportion to your complete reliance on me, with no thought of yourself. I spread treasures of graces when you are in the most squalid poverty. If you have your own resources, even a few, or if you seek them, you are at the natural level. Thus, you follow the natural way of things, which often are dominated by Satan. Now, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to kind of start wrapping up here. We've come full circle. We're back to the Sermon on the Mount that I talked about. Here, Dolindo is saying, if you have your own resources, or if you seek them, you are at the natural level. Thus, you follow the natural way of things, which often are dominated by Satan. So we have come back to no man can serve two masters. He will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. And if you're anxious about your life, you are choosing the wrong master. So I'm preaching to myself. I mean, don't take this wrong. I mean, it's not like I'm in a different category. One of the great delights of doing this is the ability to convince myself, or to try to convince myself. But it's also a great pleasure to try to convince you. And I think that if you pray, and I certainly encourage you to pray as much as possible, what happens is sometimes when one is in prayer and recollected, this stuff seems very real and apparent to one. And then at other times, the storm surge sweeps over you, and you are consumed with anxiety and panic and everything. And that's, we have resources to help deal with that. I hope that this show was a little bit of one of those resources. The readings of the saints are wonderful resources to deal with that. The Abandonment to Divine Providence book is a wonderful resource. The Surrender Novena that is attributed to Dolindo is a wonderful resource, and so forth. And there are prayers of confidence. There's a litany of trust, and so forth. And they're there for a reason. We need them sometimes. So this is a battle, but we might as well arm ourselves. We better arm ourselves as well as we can. So with that, it's time for me to say goodbye. I'm going to go out again with a little bit of beautiful music, again by the Sisters of Bethlehem. And this time it is the Our Father in Arabic, since I just cited the beginning of the Our Father. And so with that, you've been listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Showman. Join us again next week, same time, same place. Bye for now. Oh, excuse me. Okay, we'll have the music in a second here. Little technical glitch here. Okay, here we go with the Our Father in Arabic. Okay, now I'm back with just the crew here. Okay, I didn't have a chance to follow the chat stream during the show. I was kind of too, have to keep talking during the show. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching. And now you've had 3 doses of this if you watched the live stream 3 days in a row. But I have to preach to myself or else I forget. Thanks a lot. And okay, so that's it. Bye for now. I don't even remember how I close here. Okay, maybe I'll close this way. Whoops, that's not going to do it. Okay.
Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, 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 Señor Jesús, Ven, Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven, Señor Jesús.